There's a moment that happens in the body before it happens in the mind. A slight drop in the chest, not pain, just a soft collapse. It shows up after a conversation that seemed fine. After you listened, after you stayed a little longer than you wanted to, nothing went wrong. And yet something feels used up. You don't think about it right away, you move on, you answer another message, you hold another silence. But later, when the room is quiet, the feeling comes back, not loud, just heavy. It's hard to explain. Because no one took anything from you. They didn't mean to, and that's what makes it uncomfortable. There's a strange tension in realizing you're tired without knowing why. Like waking up sore without remembering the fall. Most people assume exhaustion comes from effort, from doing too much, from giving too much. But that's not the part most people notice. There's something quieter happening underneath. Something that doesn't look like giving. Something that feels more like listening too closely. You may notice it in how your attention moves, how it drifts toward what's unsaid, how it settles on the shift in tone rather than the words. You hear the pause before someone admits they're fine. You feel the weight behind a casual laugh. And without deciding to, you adjust. You soften, you make room. No one asked you to, you just do. It happens early. So early, it doesn't feel like a choice. You don't think of it as care or sensitivity or anything like that. It just feels like awareness. But awareness has a cost when it never rests. Still, that's not the part that stays with you. The part that lingers is the distance afterward. The strange gap that forms once the moment has passed, when the connection fades and you're left holding something that isn't yours anymore. You may tell yourself it's normal, that this is just how closeness works, but something about it repeats. Different people, different settings, same quiet outcome. You leave conversations feel slightly unseen, not ignored, just unmirrored. And you don't bring it up because nothing obvious happened. That's where the confusion grows. If there's no clear harm, there's nothing to point to. So the feeling turns inward. It settles into the background. You carry it with you. There's often a belief that this kind of tiredness means you care too much, that you feel deeply. But that explanation never quite lands. It's too simple, because caring isn't the part that drains you. There's another movement happening before the care even arrives, a subtle lean, a quiet orientation toward the other person's inner world. You may not notice it until much later, when you're alone and the room finally feels still enough to hear yourself again. That's when the fatigue becomes clear. It doesn't ask for rest. It asks for distance. But distance feels wrong, unnatural, because closeness has always meant staying alert. Most people think closeness is built through sharing, through saying more, through being open. But for you, it often forms through sensing, through noticing, through adjusting before anything is said. And that kind of closeness asks something different of you. It asks you to remain slightly outside yourself, not fully gone, just paused. You stay there longer than you realize. That's where it starts to change, not in the moment itself, but in the pattern it leaves behind. You begin to recognize the shape of it, the way relationships feel familiar very quickly, the way intensity comes early and then just as quietly fades. You may wonder why people open up to you so easily, why they trust you, why they tell you things they say they've never told anyone else. But that question doesn't lead anywhere satisfying, because it doesn't explain why you often feel lonelier afterward. There's a subtle contradiction there, being close without feeling met. That's the tension that keeps returning, and for a long time, it doesn't have a name. You might assume it's because you haven't found the right people yet, or that you're simply wired this way, but that explanation starts to feel thin, because even when the connection feels different at first, the ending feels the same. That sameness is important. It suggests something internal, something consistent, not a flaw, not a mistake, just a pattern. This is usually the point where people rush toward clarity, toward answers. But the truth sits behind another layer, because the pattern doesn't begin with other people. It begins earlier. Much earlier. It begins with how attention learned to move. There was a time when noticing shifts mattered, when sensing mood was useful, when being aware kept things stable. You learned to read rooms before you learned to name your own feelings. That skill didn't come from nowhere. It formed quietly, without explanation, and it stayed. Now, halfway through this realization, something becomes visible. The repetition isn't about being too kind or too open. It's about where your center of gravity goes when someone else is present. Without noticing, it shifts outward. You orient toward their experience, their comfort, their emotional weather, not because you're selfless, but because it feels familiar. Because presence once meant attunement. So you listen with your whole body, you stay flexible, you soften your edges. And in doing so, you disappear just enough to feel it later. That's the pattern that repeats. Not sacrifice, not overgiving, but a quiet relocation of self. You don't leave entirely, you just step aside. And when the moment passes, there's no clear path back. This isn't something you decided, it's something that learned you. That's why it's hard to interrupt, because it doesn't feel like a behavior. It feels like being present. But presence, when it's one-sided, becomes a kind of absence. You're there, but not fully with yourself. That's the cost that goes unnoticed. Over time, this creates a strange emotional muscle memory. Connection becomes associated with subtle loss. So even when closeness is real, something braces, something holds back, not from fear, from fatigue. You've learned what happens afterward. This is where awareness shifts things, not by fixing anything, not by changing who you are, but by seeing the movement as it happens. The moment your attention leaves you, the moment you begin to adjust without being asked, not to stop it, just to notice it, because what's been missing isn't care from others, it's recognition from yourself. The pattern softens when it's seen, not immediately, not dramatically, just gradually. You begin to feel when you're stepping aside, when you're holding space that no one asked you to hold. And sometimes you don't step back in right away. You let the moment pass without filling it. That can feel strange, almost empty. But inside that space, something returns. Not energy, not certainty, just a sense of being located again. Toward the end of this understanding, there's no grand conclusion, no resolution, just a quieter relationship with your own presence. You may still notice everything. You may still feel deeply, but the pattern loosens when you no longer vanish to maintain closeness. And that shift doesn't announce itself. It arrives softly. In the way conversations feel less heavy afterward. In the way silence feels less demanding, nothing is fixed, but something is no longer lost.